my lessons from that were, as a founder, it's very tempting to cross the line. And everyone knows their line. The moment you question a decision, the moment you think about a decision, like, should I? Is this questionable? Is this okay? The moment you have those kind of internal thoughts, you know you're staring at a line. And I think the only advice I have is that if you cross that line, it's very, very, very hard to go back. And that line looks tempting. It has money, it has fundraising, it has status, it has glamour, it has your face probably on Forbes 30 under 30. And we all know where that leads you. It is tempting. So my advice as a founder is stick to your guts, stick to your guns, build a real business.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. You don't want to miss Geeks on a Beach, the unique premier startup conference in the region. Join us from November 13th to 15, 2024 at J Park Island Resort in Mactan, Cebu. This event brings together tech enthusiasts, investors, and entrepreneurs for 3 days of workshops, talks, and networking. Register at geeksonabeach.com and use code BRAVEC for a 45% discount for the first 10 registrations and 35% off for the next ones. Hey, Avik, how are you?
Hey, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here. Very well.
Yeah, great. Well, lots of folks have been asking about the Indian ecosystem and how it relates to Southeast Asia. And I thought to myself, maybe this could be a good conversation for us to get started and see how it goes. So, Avik, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Perfect. I was happy to. So a little bit about me. My name's Avik Ashar. I grew up in the Middle East. I moved to India, studied here in Mumbai, worked here in the Indian tech ecosystem, then got poached by a family office to run their startup investments in 2012. My first investment, ironically, was in Singapore. And post that, I invested in 22 more companies in India across 2012 to 2017. At that point in time, it was insane. There were about 10 VCs in the entire country. There were about 30 family offices and a handful of angels. We'd meet together. We literally meet at the National Stock Exchange office. They were kind enough to host us and give us a room to meet up and chat, and a few other folks' offices. And Meetup is primarily through Indian Angel Network, which is the first angel network in the entire country in an organized manner. And there's nothing more than that. And I got poached because the family office, who's traditionally into diamonds and real estate, as old school businesses as you can get, woke up one day and said, hey, we see these startups raising ridiculous sums of money. We can't raise it, but we want to be part of this in that journey. So let's try and invest. So ended up investing on their behalf for 5 years. Post that, I was really soul searching, wanted to know what I want to do next. And a whole bunch of mentors said, you need to go and build something. I firmly believe that you should build something if you find a really big pain point. And I hadn't found that kind of pain point yet in my life. So then the next best thing was to help somebody else build something. And I ended up joining Zilingo with Ankit Bose and Dhruv Kapoor. And that turned out into its own entire story. That's what brought me to Southeast Asia. I moved to Bangkok for a year and then Singapore for about 7 years. It's own journey.
Definitely a whole journey.
Yeah. So I think the Zilingo story is always something that people want to know, and let's get it out of the way a bit early in the conversation. There was definitely a period where I said that we were doing something a bit stupid. I could not believe that we raised the level of money that we did, the way we did, the speed at which we did, and the amount that we were given. This was all across 2017 to 2020, 2021. And I've never seen capital deployed at that speed or scale in my life. One of the most startling memories for me was when I first joined my first week, and I was in office on a Friday evening. I left by about 7, and suddenly I get a call from Ankit saying, hey, why have you left office? And my initial reaction was 7 and Friday. My first week, I've left office. I said goodbye to my boss and I walked up. And she's like, no, your boss is sitting there and he's working very hard to make sure that we don't have a degrowth month. And That's when I asked her, what does that mean? And she's like, in our history, we have never had a month where our revenue for the last month was less than this month. I'm like, but we're a marketplace. That really shouldn't be the case. How does that work? I mean, it could work in a predictable SaaS business. It could work in a few other kinds of businesses, but in a marketplace, you're basically at the mercy of customers. There might be a bad month. It happens. How do we never have a bad month? She was like, go to office. I reached there and my boss said, okay, we have to do something. We're going to give you money and you have to go and buy Apple watches and put it on the platform. And we're going to sell Apple watches. I'm like, we're a fashion lifestyle platform. Why are we doing this? He's like, no, we're going to buy these watches and then we're going to sell them at a discount and then we're going to hit our monthly numbers. And at this point, I might sound like a broken record, but I was like, but why? And my boss was like, no, that's what we have to do. So that kind of kicked off the entire Zilingo. Post that, I stayed with the company. I ended up being asked to monetize the company. And in my attempts to do that, I ended up discovering the intricacies of B2B manufacturing, textile garment manufacturing. I went to Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, India, Indonesia, went and visited factories on the ground and really understood how they operated. And that's where I figured that they needed a lot more tech, they needed a lot more digitization, they needed a lot more support across the board. And we went in to give them that support. And it started off pretty well. We started acting as their liaisons because typically with factories, what happens is that they are very mom and pop run. So your pop is the CEO, your mom is the CFO, the daughter is the head of marketing, the son's the head of sales, and they literally traverse the world trying to sell their products. And we're like, this really can't be the way this has to operate. The biggest amount of tech they have in their entire factory is Excel. So we went in and said, hey, we're going to give you guys solutions. We're going to improve visibility. We're going to make sure that you have better control over your factory, better control over your production. And that was the pitch. And of course, better access to raw materials. So we started going further upstream to get them cotton, to get them polyester, to get them yarn, fabric. And in this entire journey, I think the entire message was lost somewhere in the middle where a famous Indian unicorn founder, not going to mention, suggested to us that why don't you start giving everybody in this supply chain a 2% discount? And the moment you do that, you're going to, missing step, make a lot of money. I'm like, this sounds intriguing, but could you tell me more about the missing step? And they never mentioned anything about the missing step. This conversation happened late at night over drinks. I was hoping that nobody's going to remember it in the morning. Unfortunately, did remember it in the morning. And the next day, she was like, hey, we have to start giving out a 2% discount to all our merchants. Here, I'm sighing internally. We're like, we've taught these merchants that we're not giving them a free lunch, that we are a valuable platform. We were earning very little. Like our take rates were in the few single-digit percentages, very low single digits. But we taught them that there's value to the platform. And the instructions that were then passed that you need to give these discounts. And it was over lunch in Bangkok once where I said, I don't want to do this. And the response was, then we need to find somebody else to lead the B2B team. At this point, I'm just going to stop with one piece of advice for anybody who's listening to this. If you ever feel that anyone in your life is asking you to take decisions that don't fit well with you, don't sit well with you, or follow any form of ethics that you follow, quit. Assuming you have the means, the capability. Quitting is a privilege as well, but quit. Anyway, I didn't do this, so I jumped on the bandwagon and said, if you're not going to quit, you have to listen to whatever your boss says. So I jumped in, started doing what my boss said, and within 6 months, we were at 50 million a month in gross merchandise value, fancy numbers, and we were raising money. And I was like, this can't possibly work. And lo and behold, in a couple of months, we had raised money from Temasek, from Susquehanna International Group, from Sofina, from Berda, from every fund that Sequoia has virtually in the world. We raised money from every single who's who in the world. We raised around 226 million on the back of numbers that hopefully a 22-year-old public market analyst should have been able to see through. So it was an interesting and eye-opening experience. And I carry that experience with me as a VC every single day. One of my first thoughts is India and Indians are not for beginners.
When you think about all of that, obviously there's lots of advice that you have, and we'll talk about this more in the future. But when you reflect on that, what do you think were some of the lessons that you took away from that?
I think some of the lessons I took away were, and I'm going to go first with a founder hat on and then as a VC hat on because I sit both sides. I think my lessons from that were, as a founder, it's very, very tempting to cross the line. And everyone knows their line. Everyone knows they have a line. The moment you question a decision, the moment you think about a decision like, should I? Is this questionable? Is this okay? The moment you have those kind of internal thoughts, you know you're staring at a line. And I think the only advice I have is that if you cross that line, it's very, very, very hard to go back. I'm not going to judge anyone who crosses it, not crosses it. Those are people's personal decisions in life. But if you cross that line, it's a very hard decision to walk back on. And that line looks tempting. It has money, it has fundraising, it has status, it has glamour, it has your face probably on Forbes 30 under 30. And we all know where that leads you. It's tempting. So my advice as a founder is stick to your guts, stick to your guns, build a real business. It's tempting to cross lines. As a VC, my piece of advice is, and especially since I know a lot of Southeast Asian folks are looking at India. In the past 6 months, since I moved back from Singapore to India, I've had about 25 funds reach out to me saying, hey, what's going on in India? We are in varying degrees. Either we have no allocation to India and now we're allocating some money to India. We have a 20% allocation to India. Now we're increasing it to 50%. And varying degrees of, we were a Southeast Asian fund. Now we're looking at India. My advice to them is India is really not for beginners. Be tight on the valuations. Be super diligent on diligence itself. Almost any number you see could be fabricated. Bank statements, ask for a live viewing. I've literally had an experience where I've had a founder send me fabricated bank statements for cash flow. So anything and everything can be fabricated. But that being said, I don't think I've seen an opportunity like this country is for the next decade, barring probably China in the 1980s. There is a level of growth here that's unbelievable. There are people coming out. India has 1.4 billion people. We have more people than USA, Brazil, Indonesia, and another 10 countries you can throw and put together. One of our states is the population of Indonesia, Uttar Pradesh. So that just gives people a little bit of context of the size and the sheer scale. It's also really important to remember that this nation has to be looked at almost in the way you look at different countries, where you have people, and it's sad to say, but I'm going to break it down. It's broken down by socioeconomic strata. You have people who have the spending capability and capacity of anyone in New York, London, or Singapore. And that sits at the top of the pyramid. That's maybe 30, 40 million people. And that's incredible because these cities don't have that many people. And these folks have a crazy amount of disposable income and they are not afraid to spend it. They want better and better products, produce. The fact that they have chosen to continue living in this country is because primarily they have business interests. They could live anywhere in the world. They're here and now they want the kind of access they had to global luxuries in this country. I was at an event a couple of months ago and we had a few ministers speaking. They were talking about the growth of the country. But for me, one of the biggest takeaways was sitting in the audience and somebody next to me was from a private jet company. I just started having a word with them and said, hey, private jets, are they picking up in India? Are people willing to spend on it? And she looked at me, she handed me a card and said, yeah, but we usually booked out 3-4 months in advance. We've been adding one jet or plane every 2 weeks. You have my card. Maybe I can get you something a bit quicker, but that's our timeline. I'm like, who the hell are these people booking private planes and helicopters on a regular basis? So that's India 1. Then you have India 2, which I think I'd put myself in India too. You have this bunch of folks who started off firmly like in the middle class. And at that point in time, salaries didn't really pay much. When I started my first job, my salary was 30,000 rupees a month. That works out to the 3.5 lakhs a year. That's effectively under 4,000 Singapore dollars on an annual basis. That was my starting salary. After doing a degree in economics, maybe I didn't pay that much attention, but it was from a very good college. That was the kind of salaries that you would expect. And today, the world has just opened up. People are paying more. People are realizing that there's a market, there's opportunity, there's income, and people's expectations have risen. So India 2, which I would bucket as about 70 to 100 million people, is something I think I'm the most excited about. That's driving the consumption story of this country. These are folks who have probably in their lifetimes, their parents and them have unlocked money to travel abroad 2-3 times, see the world, taste ramen in Japan or something else, like have wine in Italy, and they're coming back and they're like, hey, we want something resembling that. So you're seeing a massive boom in consumption, in direct to consumer, in the consumer ecosystem over here with new brands coming out. I mean, this is something that reminds me of something I grew up with in Oman. It's roasted corn with a lemon, chili, and cilantro flavor, which you wouldn't be able to access in India even 3-4 years ago. This is the way the consumerism wave has basically just flown across, where everybody wants to access different products, different things, taste different things, try different things. And I think it's a fantastic time both to be an investor as well as a consumer in this country because you're just trying things that are different. I had a butter chicken risotto yesterday, and it was the craziest mishmash of Indian, North Indian, and Italian. It's like people are experimenting and having fun with it. So my advice to anybody in the world right now, especially capital and founders, this is a country to look at very seriously.
I think what's interesting, of course, is that you've experience in both like Singapore as well as India and Southeast Asia. Could you share a little bit more about those links from your perspective?
Sure. I think that my experience, especially in Southeast Asia, has taught me. My first thought was that everyone said, oh, Southeast Asia. I mean, the entire world breathes Southeast Asia in one breath. So you think it's fairly homogeneous and put together. That is absolutely not the case. I think I saw this first when I started interacting with colleagues, and then more importantly, when I became a manager and started managing people, especially across different countries, that the way you interact, the way you work, the way you want to motivate people in an Indonesia versus a Vietnam versus a Thailand versus a Philippines is entirely different. They have their own, every culture is absolutely beautifully unique. And that's beautiful, but also very tough as a manager to grasp for the first time. And learning that, understanding that was my biggest takeaway living in Southeast Asia. It was beautiful. And the link that I think that I took back with me to India was once again, when people say the word India, they're like, yeah, okay, there's this little country. I go back to 1.4 billion people. People can't grasp the size and scale of what 1.4 billion people means. It's very, very hard. I think I only grasped it the first time I ever took a local train in Mumbai. And when you are squeezed in like a sardine, you look around and you're like, hey, each station has the equivalent of about 1 million people at any given point of time. Like, yeah, I think I understand a bit better about what 1.4 billion really represents. But the takeaway that I took was the fact that India is also not homogeneous. We are definitely one country, we are one people in a sense of pride, in a sense of nationalism. But India's another, the uniqueness of this country is if you travel 120 kilometers in any distance, north, south, east, or west, you will encounter a different dialect, transitioning to a different language, a different set of beliefs, barring base beliefs, a different set of cultural values, a completely different set of food, which is just amazing for anyone who's on a foodie exploration, and a different way of interacting, a different way of working. And it's so important to understand that because while traditionally startups in India were software, were technology, we will build it here because we have amazing engineers, and then we will sell it to the US and Europe and Southeast Asia and the Middle East. But now that the India story is building, people are trying to build for, and a lot of them use the colloquial term Bharat, saying we are building for the old world, we're building for the broader world. And I always see that there's a big mismatch because there are people who grew up like me, maybe not abroad, but like a Bombay or a Delhi, a Mumbai or a Delhi or a Bangalore. And these cities aren't representative or reflective of the country. They are microcosms that effectively are emulating your New York, London, Singapore. They aren't reflective of the entire country. So for anyone who's looking to work with the country on a deeper level, engage with the country on a deeper level, you cannot use these cities as examples. You cannot use these cities as, I know India. You don't. Indianized version of any global city in the world. If you want to understand India, you need to jump in a car and drive out. And you really need to reach or Satara or Sangli. You need to go into the heartlands of the country to understand what people need over there. It's very different from what people need over here. And that's my entire kind of takeaway and the link between what I see between Southeast Asia and India. Because Southeast Asia has its own challenges in the same way. When I went to Thailand for the first time, there are about, I think, 20 million people in Bangkok. That's somewhere around 10% of plus of Thailand's population in Greater Bangkok. But that's, again, internationalized city. If you really want to understand the Thai people, you need to go. And again, Chiang Mai doesn't count, it's tourism. You need to go deeper into every other city that nobody knows the name of in Thailand. You need to go and see that. In Indonesia, similarly, Jakarta, Greater Jabodetabek area, is about 30 million people. Indonesia is about 260 million people. And anyone who goes to Jakarta stays in that Keningan microcosm, which is maybe a few kilometers across. You're not looking at Jakarta, you're looking at the internationalized version of Jakarta and of Indonesia. You don't know the country, you've not seen the country. So for folks anywhere that are looking to engage with Southeast Asia, with India, don't make the mistake of thinking that your commercial capital is representative of the country.
Well, thank you so much, Avik, for sharing your point of view and looking forward to chat more about India's conditions.
Thank you, Jeremy. It has been wonderful sharing everything with you. And I think just overall following Brave and the podcast and seeing so many people's diverse points of view, it's been incredible. India's infrastructure is getting there, but still has a long way to go. Thank you.
On that note, we'll wrap up. Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.